He was a man who lived life quietly, not looking for attention or praise. Every morning he would wake up before the sun, make a simple breakfast, and prepare his young child for school. His life was simple, filled with routines that many would consider ordinary. He worked a regular job, one that didn't offer much excitement or recognition, but it allowed him to take care of his child and keep a roof over their heads. On the outside, he seemed like any other single parent doing their best, but inside, there was a story that very few knew. He had a love for music that went back to his childhood. When he was younger, he had dreamed of being a pianist. He spent hours practicing, feeling every note, understanding how music could express emotions that words never could. But life had other plans. Responsibilities, bills, and the reality of raising a child on his own took over. The piano sat in the corner of his living room gathering dust, yet it held a presence, a quiet reminder of the dreams he once had. Despite this, he never let go of the feeling that music was a part of him. Late at night, after tucking his child into bed, he would sometimes sit at the piano and let his fingers wander over the keys. He didn't perform for anyone. He didn't record videos or post on social media. It was just for him, a secret escape from the struggles of the day. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would allow himself to imagine being on a stage, feeling the energy of an audience, letting the music flow freely without worry or fear. His child knew that music was special to him. Sometimes they would peek into the living room and watch as their parents' fingers moved over the keys. The look on their parents' face was always different when they played, soft, thoughtful, and alive. It was a side of him that didn't appear at work, in the grocery store, or anywhere else. This secret talent was his hidden world, a place where he could be fully himself. Life was not always easy. Being a single parent meant juggling multiple roles, often leaving him exhausted. There were mornings when he barely had time to eat, evenings when he barely had time to breathe. Yet he carried on with determination. The smiles of his child, the laughter they shared, and the small moments of happiness kept him going. He never complained, never sought pity, because he understood that life demanded resilience and quiet strength. On one particular morning, he woke up feeling unusually calm. The sunlight seeped through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the kitchen. He made breakfast with care, preparing the simple meal just the way his child liked it. They ate together, talking about school, friends, and the small adventures they planned for the weekend. After breakfast, he walked them to school, holding their hand, talking softly, sharing encouragement for the day ahead. Every moment was ordinary, yet there was a gentle beauty in it, a rhythm to life that felt comforting. After dropping off his child, he headed to the community center where a local event was scheduled for later that day. He wasn't part of the event, wasn't a performer or an organizer, but he had volunteered to help with small tasks. Polishing the stage, arranging chairs, and setting up decorations were his contributions. He moved with care, ensuring everything looked perfect even though no one had asked him to go beyond the basics. He believed that attention to detail mattered, even in tasks that seemed insignificant. As he worked, he noticed people passing by, preparing for the event, setting up booths, and checking sound equipment. He didn't know most of them, and they didn't know him. He was just another volunteer, quietly doing his job, unnoticed in the flurry of activity. But that didn't matter to him. He liked being helpful, liked seeing things in order, and found satisfaction in a job well done, even if no one noticed. While polishing the stage, he paused for a moment and looked at the piano sitting at the corner of the room. It was an old upright, slightly worn, with keys that had seen many years of use. He ran his fingers lightly over the top, feeling the familiar smoothness. Memories of his childhood, of late-night practices and dreams of performing, filled his mind. He smiled faintly, remembering the feeling of losing himself in music, how it made life feel richer, deeper, and more meaningful. Other volunteers walked past, chatting and laughing, not paying much attention to him. He stayed focused, moving slowly and methodically, his mind drifting to thoughts of music. He imagined what it would be like to sit at that piano, to play not for himself but for an audience. The idea felt strange, almost impossible. Yet there was a spark of excitement in his chest. He wondered if the notes still flowed as they used to, if his fingers remembered the movements, the melodies, the emotion. He continued polishing, moving carefully across the stage, making sure every spot was clean. Occasionally he hummed softly under his breath, a melody he hadn't sung aloud in years. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it reminded him that music was still a part of his life. It didn't matter that no one else heard it. It mattered to him. And in that small, ordinary moment, he felt a connection to the dreams he had once held so tightly. Hours passed as he worked. The community center slowly filled with activity. People set up decorations, checked schedules, and prepared for performers. He kept polishing, arranging, and making sure everything was perfect. His calm demeanor and attention to detail didn't go unnoticed by a few organizers, who nodded in appreciation as he passed by. But for the most part, he remained in the background, just another helper, quietly contributing without fanfare. During a short break, he sat near the piano, letting his hands rest. He looked at it and thought about the countless hours he had spent playing, about the joy it had brought him, and about the sacrifices that had kept him from pursuing it fully. He thought about his child, how important it was to provide stability, love, and guidance. Yet he also thought about himself, realizing that even in the midst of responsibility, there was a part of him that still longed to play, to express, to share music with the world. He touched the keys lightly, almost absent-mindedly, and a soft note rang out. It startled him and he smiled. The sound was familiar, comforting, and alive. He pressed another key, then another, feeling the flow of the notes, the rhythm returning to him naturally. He didn't play loudly, didn't perform, just let the music emerge quietly like a gentle whisper. But in that moment it was enough. The piano, the music, and the memories were all connected, and he felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew the day would bring challenges, responsibilities, and more work. But for a brief moment as he sat at the piano, he felt free. Free to be himself. Free to remember who he was beyond the roles of provider, caretaker, and worker. Free to connect with the music that had always been a part of him, waiting quietly for the right moment to return. And though no one else in the room could hear the full melody he imagined, he felt it deeply, in his heart and in his soul. When he finally stood up and walked back to his polishing, he carried that quiet joy with him. His movements were steadier, his focus sharper, and his mind lighter. He didn't know it yet, but that small, ordinary morning would lead to something extraordinary. The piano, the stage, and the audience that would soon gather were all part of a moment that would change everything. But for now, he continued with his work, a single dad quietly polishing the stage, unaware that in just a short while, his life, and the lives of everyone around him, would be touched in a way none of them could imagine. The morning had passed quietly, and the community center began to fill with people preparing for the event. Colorful banners hung from the walls, and volunteers moved around with busy hands, checking schedules and setting up equipment. He continued polishing the stage, moving slowly and deliberately, but he couldn't help noticing the growing energy in the room. People were talking excitedly about the performers, some rehearsing their routines, others adjusting their instruments. He stayed in the background, feeling content to just help, quietly observing everything around him. At one point, one of the organizers approached him with a friendly smile. "Hey, since you're here and seem so comfortable around the piano, why don't you play something?" "Just a few notes, nothing serious." He froze. His fingers instinctively brushed against the edge of the piano, but he shook his head gently. "Oh no, I'm just here to help, really," he said, his voice soft. He didn't want attention. Performing wasn't part of the plan, and he wasn't ready for anyone to see this side of him. But the organizer insisted, laughing lightly. "Come on, just for a second. We have a few minutes before the next act. Just show us something. I promise, no pressure." He hesitated, glancing at the piano. His mind raced with memories of past performances, the joy and freedom he had felt while playing, and the fear of stepping into the spotlight. The thought of people watching him, judging him, or even laughing at his playing was frightening. But at the same time, there was a small spark of excitement, a quiet voice telling him he could do it, that maybe this moment was meant to happen. He walked slowly to the piano, each step feeling heavier than the last. The chatter of the room seemed to fade into the background as he sat down on the bench. He took a deep breath, placing his hands on the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath his fingers. The room grew quiet, as if sensing something unusual was about to unfold. A few people noticed him, curious about what was happening, and a small crowd began to gather around the stage. He pressed a single key, then another. The sound filled the room, soft and hesitant at first. He closed his eyes, letting his memory guide him. The notes began to flow, tentative but steady, carrying emotion and depth that surprised even him. His fingers remembered the movements, the rhythm, the feeling, even if his mind had been away from it for so long. The music was alive, and it spoke of experiences, struggles, and quiet joys that words could never capture. As he played, the crowd grew more attentive. People stopped what they were doing, drawn to the sound that seemed to come from a place deep inside. The notes were not flashy or showy. They were honest, raw, and moving. Some listeners exchanged glances, unsure why the music affected them so strongly. There was a story in every chord, a truth in every pause, and a warmth in every melody. He glanced briefly at his child, who had quietly followed him into the room. Their eyes were wide, filled with awe and surprise. They had known their parent could play, but they had never seen them perform in front of anyone. Pride and amazement mingled in their expression, and he felt a rush of emotion that made his fingers move with even more purpose and feeling. Each note seemed to reflect not just his own story, but the shared experiences of a lifetime, the quiet battles and small victories that had brought him to this moment. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The music grew richer, more confident as he allowed himself to fully immerse in it. He wasn't thinking about the audience, the applause, or even the event itself. He was thinking only of the music, letting it flow naturally, letting it speak the words he could not. He felt a strange sense of liberation, as if all the weight he carried every day, the responsibilities, the worries, the doubts, was lifting, replaced by something pure and true. The audience became still, completely absorbed in the performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned forward as if trying to catch every subtle nuance, every emotion hidden in the notes. The room, once filled with chatter and movement, was now quiet, unified by the power of the music. Even the event organizers, who had seen countless performances, were caught off guard by the depth and sincerity of what they were hearing. He continued, unaware of the passage of time. The melody shifted, soft and gentle at first, then building with intensity, conveying a range of emotions that seemed impossible to capture in such a brief moment. There was sorrow, longing, joy, hope, and love, all woven together in a tapestry of sound. Every chord told a story, every pause held meaning, and every note connected him to the audience in a way that words never could. At one point he opened his eyes and scanned the crowd. Faces were glistening with tears, hands pressed to chests, eyes wide in disbelief. The music had touched something deep within them, stirring memories, feelings, and emotions they hadn't expected to confront that day. He felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of humility, pride, and surprise. He had only intended to play a few notes, a small gesture, yet it had become something far greater than he had imagined. His child watched intently, their small hands clasped together, eyes shining with admiration. They whispered softly, almost to themselves, "I didn't know you could do that." The words filled him with warmth, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond recognition or applause. In that moment, he realized that the true reward wasn't in the attention of others, but in the connection he had created, the emotions he had shared, and the legacy he was passing on to his child. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room remained silent for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then slowly the audience began to clap, softly at first, then louder and louder until the sound filled the entire space. Some stood, some wiped tears from their eyes, and some simply stared, unable to find words that could express what they had felt. The applause was not just for the performance, but for the honesty, the courage, and the beauty that had emerged from someone they had thought was just another volunteer. He stood slowly, feeling the heat in his cheeks and the pounding of his heart. The room seemed brighter, fuller, and somehow lighter. People approached him, shaking his hand, thanking him and telling him how moved they had been. He smiled, shy and a little overwhelmed, not used to receiving such attention. Yet, he felt a sense of fulfillment that went far beyond any recognition. He had shared a piece of himself, and the impact was undeniable. The event organizers were speechless, exchanging amazed glances. They hadn't expected a simple volunteer to produce such an emotional performance. Some whispered to each other, wondering how they had overlooked this hidden talent for so long. The piano, once just an instrument in the corner, had become a bridge, connecting the audience to something real, heartfelt, and unforgettable. He returned to his child, kneeling to their level. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew they weren't scared or upset. "I just played some music, but you were amazing," his child whispered, eyes wide. "Everyone was crying, and I've never seen anything like it." He smiled, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. "Sometimes music just comes out without thinking," he said, though inside he knew it was more than that. It was a part of him, a piece of his story, and now it had touched the lives of others in ways he hadn't imagined. As the crowd continued to settle and the event resumed, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had only meant to play for a moment, just to give a small demonstration, but it had grown into something far more meaningful. The stage, the piano, the people, and the emotions all converged in that short performance, leaving a mark that would not soon be forgotten. And though he returned to helping with other tasks, polishing chairs and arranging decorations, a new energy surrounded him, a sense that the ordinary could become extraordinary at any moment, if only one had the courage to embrace it. The single dad sat back down at the piano, the room now quiet in anticipation. The soft murmur of the audience faded into silence, as if everyone sensed something special was about to happen. He took a deep breath, letting the moment settle around him, and placed his fingers on the keys. This was no longer just a small demonstration. It was an unplanned, heartfelt performance, and he could feel the weight of it pressing gently on his shoulders. He started slowly, a delicate melody that seemed to float in the air, gentle and inviting. Each note was carefully chosen, flowing naturally, carrying emotion without force. People leaned forward, captivated by the beauty and the authenticity of the sound. Some closed their eyes, letting memories, feelings, and thoughts emerge that they hadn't realized were tucked away. It was as if the piano itself were telling a story, and each person in the audience was listening, feeling it deeply in their own way. His child sat at the edge of the stage, eyes wide and unblinking, mesmerized by the performance. Every note seemed to express what words could not. Pride, wonder, and amazement filled the young observer. They had always known their parent loved music, but seeing it expressed so fully, so openly in front of a crowd was extraordinary. For a moment they felt as though they were witnessing magic, something rare and pure. As the melody continued, it gradually grew stronger, more confident. His fingers moved over the keys with a grace that came from years of practice, passion, and experience. He did not rush, nor did he force the music. Each note came naturally, filled with subtle emotion, and the room responded. Listeners leaned in, silent, some biting their lips to hold back tears. Others had their hands pressed to their hearts as if trying to hold the emotion in place. The power of the performance was not in speed or technical skill alone, but in the honesty and sincerity behind each sound. He began to remember more of the music from his past, allowing memories to guide him. Songs he had played long ago, pieces he had loved and perfected, flowed from his mind into his fingers effortlessly. The music swelled, a wave of sound that carried with it the struggles, joys, and quiet victories of his life. Life as a single parent had been difficult, filled with long hours, financial worries, and sleepless nights. But each hardship had added depth and meaning to this moment. Every note reflected those experiences, and the audience felt it, even if they did not know the details. The melody shifted, becoming softer, gentler, almost tender, as if it were speaking directly to those listening. He closed his eyes, feeling the room, the people, the emotion around him. It was no longer about performing or impressing anyone. It was about connection, about sharing something essential, something human. He imagined the lives in the room, their joys and sorrows, and let the music reach them where words could not. There was a quiet honesty in the performance, a rawness that touched hearts and lingered in the air. Some of the audience were moved to tears. They whispered to one another, unable to fully express what they were feeling. The music seemed to bypass language, going straight to the heart. People who had come to the event expecting light entertainment were now silently captivated, caught in the emotion of the moment. There were no distractions, no conversations, only the sound of the piano and the feelings it evoked. It was as if time had paused, allowing the music to exist in a space all its own. He noticed his child still sitting quietly, staring with awe. They had never seen their parent in this light before, and the sight filled him with a warm, almost overwhelming sense of pride. The connection between parent and child deepened in that shared experience. It was a silent understanding that this music, this moment was a gift not just to the audience but to them both. His love, sacrifice, and hidden talent were laid bare in a way that words could never capture. As the performance continued, the music became more dynamic, rising and falling with emotion. The rhythm shifted naturally, sometimes fast and passionate, sometimes slow and reflective. Each chord was deliberate, each pause meaningful. He could feel the reactions of the audience without looking, sensing their engagement, their emotional response. The room was alive with shared energy, and he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. He was not performing for recognition or reward. He was performing because it was who he was. He let the music tell a story of hope and perseverance, of finding light in dark times, of cherishing the moments that mattered most. The notes spoke of late nights alone at the piano, of balancing life's responsibilities, and of the simple joys of seeing his child grow and thrive. Each melody carried emotion that could not be hidden, a reflection of a life fully lived and deeply felt. The audience was silent, hanging on every note as if the music were reaching into their own lives and touching the hidden corners of their hearts. Minutes passed, but it felt longer. The performance had transformed into something larger than a casual demonstration. It was an experience, a shared journey through emotion and sound. He allowed himself to feel everything: joy, nostalgia, hope, and even sadness, letting those emotions guide his fingers over the keys. The piano became an extension of himself, each note a word, each chord a sentence telling a story that everyone could understand without speaking. He noticed the subtle reactions in the audience. Some had tears running quietly down their cheeks, while others had small smiles, lips pressed together in quiet appreciation. The music was touching people in ways that were unexpected and profound. Even the organizers, who had seen countless performances, were captivated, leaning forward, eyes glistening, fully absorbed. It was a rare moment of authenticity that could not be orchestrated or faked. It was real, human, and unforgettable. His child, now close enough to reach out and touch the piano, whispered softly, "I can't believe you can do this." The words were barely audible, but they carried weight. They saw not just a parent, but an artist, a storyteller, a person capable of moving hearts with something so simple yet profound. The pride and love radiating from the child were tangible, adding to the emotional power of the moment. As the melody drew toward its climax, the music grew stronger, bolder, more confident. The final chords were played with precision and passion, filling the room with resonance and energy. The last note lingered in the air, a gentle echo that seemed to hang between the audience and the performer. For a moment, there was complete silence. Everyone was holding their breath, feeling the impact of what they had just witnessed. Then slowly, the room erupted in applause. The applause was loud and genuine, filled with admiration, gratitude, and awe. People stood, clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. The single dad rose from the piano bench, feeling a mixture of humility, pride, and relief. He had shared a piece of himself, and the audience had received it with open hearts. The experience was overwhelming, beautiful, and profoundly human. People came forward, shaking his hand, expressing thanks, and sharing how much the music had moved them. Some hugged him, others simply nodded, unable to find words. It was clear that this impromptu performance had touched everyone present, leaving a lasting impression. He felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or fame. He had created a moment of shared emotion, a connection that would not soon be forgotten. As he stepped away from the piano, he looked down at his child, who was smiling with awe and love. The pride in their eyes mirrored the pride he felt within himself. He realized that this performance was not just for the audience, it was for them, for the life they had built together, for the love and perseverance that had carried them through difficult times. It was a celebration of resilience, of hidden talent, and of the quiet strength that defined his life. The energy in the room remained after the performance. People talked quietly among themselves, sharing their emotions and thoughts. Many commented on the depth and honesty of the music, marveling at how a simple act of playing a piano had created such a powerful experience. It was clear that this moment would stay with them for a long time, a reminder of the beauty and emotion that could be found in unexpected places. As he walked away from the stage, he felt lighter, freer, and more alive than he had in years. The music had allowed him to express what words could not, to connect with people in a meaningful way. and to share a hidden part of himself with the world. It was a reminder that even in ordinary life, extraordinary moments could arise, moments that had the power to change perspectives, touch hearts, and inspire others. He returned to helping with small tasks around the event, arranging chairs and polishing the stage, but the experience lingered in his mind. Each step felt different, more confident, more purposeful. He knew that something significant had happened, something that could not be undone or forgotten. The music had created a bridge connecting him to others in a deeply human and emotional way. And as he glanced back at the piano, he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to shape his life and the lives of those around him. The applause had barely started to fade when he noticed something remarkable. The room, once filled with ordinary chatter and background noise, now had a quiet, reflective energy. People were looking at one another with eyes wide and thoughtful expressions. Some had tears on their cheeks and others had hands pressed to their chests as if trying to hold on to the feelings that the music had stirred inside them. The performance had done more than entertain. It had touched something deep within everyone present. Event organizers, volunteers, and attendees alike were approaching him slowly. Each handshake, each word of thanks carried a weight that went beyond casual politeness. People shared personal stories about how the music reminded them of loved ones, past experiences or emotions they had long buried. Some whispered softly to each other, unable to express their emotions aloud, yet their faces told the whole story. The piano, which had sat quietly in the corner of the stage just hours before, had become a vessel of human connection and understanding. He stood quietly, taking in the reactions. He felt a mixture of humility and disbelief. He had only meant to play a few simple notes, perhaps entertain a small part of the audience for a short moment. Instead, his performance had become an emotional journey that everyone had shared. The sense of community, of unspoken understanding, was overwhelming. It was as if the music had opened invisible doors in each heart, allowing emotions to flow freely and unexpectedly. He noticed a group of older attendees standing together, wiping tears and holding hands. The music had reminded them of times long past, of moments of love and loss that they had thought forgotten. He could see gratitude and recognition in their eyes, as if the melody had spoken directly to the parts of their souls that were rarely touched. They spoke in hushed tones about how moving the performance had been, and the single dad realized that something extraordinary had occurred. He had created a bridge between his own life and the lives of others, a connection that was both intimate and universal. Children in the audience were also affected, though in different ways. Some had never witnessed anything like this, and they were wide-eyed with awe. The young ones whispered to each other, pointing at the piano and then at the performer, trying to understand how someone could create something so beautiful and heartfelt. One child approached, shyly offering a small handmade card with a drawing of a piano and a note that said, "Thank you for your music." The gesture, simple yet pure, brought a warm smile to his face. It reminded him that art and emotion could reach across generations in a way that nothing else could. The volunteers who had worked with him during setup were now filled with admiration and surprise. They had known him as a quiet, humble helper, someone who polished the stage, arranged chairs, and performed small tasks without seeking recognition. They had no idea he possessed such talent. Some of them hugged him. Some shook his hand repeatedly, and some simply nodded in quiet respect. It was a moment of realization for everyone that extraordinary talent could reside in the most unassuming people. His child remained close by, holding their parents' hand tightly. They whispered, still awed. Everyone was crying. I've never seen anyone do that. The single dad looked down, smiling softly, feeling an immense sense of pride. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about sharing something deeply human, something that had the power to touch hearts. He realized in that moment that this was not just a performance, it was a gift, both to himself and to those who had listened. As the event continued around them, he stayed near the piano for a while longer, quietly observing. He noticed people speaking in small groups, discussing the music and the emotions it had stirred. Some approached him again to express how deeply moved they were. One woman with tears in her eyes shared that the melody had reminded her of a loved one she had lost years ago, someone who had taught her to love music. Another man spoke about how the performance had given him hope during a time when he had felt discouraged. Every story he heard reinforced the incredible power of something so simple, yet so profound. He felt a sense of connection to each person he encountered. The performance had created a shared emotional space where people could experience vulnerability, empathy, and beauty together. He realized that even though he had stepped onto the stage by chance, the music had allowed him to communicate in ways that words could not. It was a reminder that human experiences were universal, that emotion could transcend differences, and that one person's expression could inspire and move many others. The organizers began to gather the performers and volunteers, preparing for the next part of the event. They spoke quietly among themselves about the unexpected performance, clearly still in awe. They wondered how someone could have such profound talent hidden beneath a quiet exterior. Some speculated about his background, imagining years of secret practice, determination, and passion that had brought him to this moment. The single dad listened without interrupting, content to let the music speak for itself. As he returned to assisting with smaller tasks, he noticed people continuing to watch him with appreciation and respect. Even though he was no longer performing, the impact of the music lingered in the room. Conversations were softer, smiles were warmer, and the atmosphere had changed in a subtle but unmistakable way. It was clear that the audience had been touched not just by the music itself, but by the sincerity and vulnerability behind it. He glanced at his child again, who was beaming with pride. The young one had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would likely remain a cherished memory for years to come. The bond between parent and child had deepened, strengthened by the shared experience of the performance and the emotional impact it had on everyone present. It was a quiet, unspoken connection that would stay with them forever. People continued to approach, some sharing stories, others expressing gratitude, and a few simply standing in silent admiration. He accepted each gesture with humility, grateful for the opportunity to share a part of himself. The experience had been unexpected, overwhelming, and profoundly moving. It was a reminder that life could surprise in the most beautiful ways, that moments of authenticity and connection could emerge when least expected. As the day progressed, the energy from the performance remained. Attendees talked about it, relived it, and shared it with others. The single dad continued to help with the event, but he carried with him a quiet joy, a sense of fulfillment, and an understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. The piano, once a silent presence in the room, had become a symbol of emotion, connection, and the hidden potential within each person. He took a moment to reflect privately, sitting near the piano after the event had quieted down. The music had changed something inside him too. It had reminded him of the dreams he once held, the passions he had set aside, and the power of sharing his true self with others. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that even small moments could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could anticipate. His child came to sit beside him, resting their head on his shoulder. They whispered softly, "I hope everyone remembers this forever." He hugged them gently, smiling, knowing that the memory would be cherished not just by them, but by everyone who had been touched by the music. It was a moment that transcended ordinary life, a glimpse into something larger, more meaningful, and profoundly human. As they left the stage together, the single dad knew that the experience had left a mark on both him and the audience. People had been moved, inspired, and reminded of the beauty of honesty, vulnerability, and talent shared freely. The piano had spoken, and in doing so it had bridged the gap between ordinary life and extraordinary emotion. He walked away quietly, carrying the memory with him, knowing that this day, this performance, and this connection would never be forgotten. The single dad walked away from the piano with a quiet sense of fulfillment, feeling the warmth of the audience's admiration still lingering in the room. Even as the event continued, he noticed small lingering moments of reflection among the attendees. People talked in hushed tones, still processing the music they had just experienced. Some shared memories triggered by the performance, while others simply stood silently, absorbing the emotions that had been stirred within them. The piano, once an ordinary instrument in the corner, had become a symbol of something much larger: connection, emotion, and the hidden potential of an ordinary person. He returned to his tasks quietly, helping wherever needed, arranging chairs, cleaning up, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. Despite all the attention he had received moments earlier, he preferred to remain modest, blending into the background while feeling a deep sense of pride inside. His child followed close by, their presence a comforting reminder of why he worked so hard every day. Their eyes kept searching for him, wide with awe and admiration, a silent acknowledgement of the wonder they had just witnessed. As the event began to wind down, the organizers approached him once more. Their expressions were filled with amazement and respect. "We didn't know you had this kind of talent," one said quietly. "That was incredible. You moved everyone in ways we didn't expect." He smiled humbly, looking down at his hands. "I was just playing. I didn't think it would matter so much, but it clearly had mattered." They nodded, still impressed, and asked if he might consider sharing more music in the future. He hesitated, unsure, but a small smile grew on his face. The thought of playing again in front of others seemed less intimidating now. He realized that the experience had shown him that it was possible to connect with people through music, to touch hearts in ways that nothing else could. After the event, as people began to leave, many came forward to express their gratitude personally. One older woman held his hand, tears glistening in her eyes, and whispered, "Your music reminded me of my husband who passed years ago. I haven't felt that connected to music in a long time." Another man, his voice trembling slightly, said, "I've been going through a rough time, and your performance gave me hope I didn't think I'd have today. Thank you." These words, simple yet profound, touched him deeply. He had only intended to share a moment of music, but the impact it had made was far greater than he could have imagined. Each story, each expression of emotion, reminded him of the power of authenticity, of sharing one's true self without hesitation or expectation. He looked around at the emptying room, now filled with remnants of an event that had transformed in unexpected ways. Chairs were being stacked, banners folded, and equipment packed away. But the energy of the performance remained, lingering in the minds and hearts of those who had witnessed it. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the music had made a difference, however small or large it might have seemed. His child ran up to him, holding a small notebook filled with drawings and notes. "Everyone loved it," they said, eyes shining. Even the people who weren't crying were smiling. "They'll remember it forever." He hugged them tightly, feeling a wave of emotion he could not put into words. "I'm glad you were here to see it," he said softly. "Sometimes the best moments are the ones we don't expect." Later that evening, as they walked home together, he reflected on the day. Life had been challenging, filled with responsibilities, sacrifices, and routines that left little room for personal passions. But today had reminded him of something he had almost forgotten, that even amidst the ordinary, extraordinary moments could arise. That music, when shared honestly, had the power to move people, to connect hearts, and to create lasting memories. At home, he placed the piano in the corner, running his fingers lightly over the keys. The memory of the performance lingered, filling him with warmth and inspiration. He knew he could never go back to seeing the piano as merely a piece of furniture. It had become a vessel for expression, emotion, and connection, and he felt a renewed desire to continue playing, both for himself and for others who might one day hear and feel the music as deeply as the audience had. The next few days brought unexpected attention. A few people from the community center shared the performance on social media, and soon, local news outlets took notice. They spoke of the single dad who had transformed a simple moment into a powerful emotional experience that left everyone in tears. Messages of support, admiration, and encouragement began arriving from people he had never met, all moved by the music and the authenticity of his performance. Despite the attention, he remained humble. He did not seek fame or recognition. His joy came from knowing that the music had touched people in meaningful ways. He continued to care for his child, attend work, and fulfill his responsibilities, but now with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. The performance had shown him that it was never too late to embrace one's passions, and that even small,